Blade, a superhero. Hey there, my friends. Welcome to Ty Shahan. Today, we're going to recap a movie that might have set the stage for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's a superhero horror movie called Blade, released in 1998. Get ready for some spoilers as we dive in. The movie revolves around Blade, a human-vampire hybrid known as the Daywalker. He has all the strength of a vampire, but only one of their weaknesses, the thirst for blood. Blade hates vampires and secretly fights against them, protecting oblivious humans from their blood-sucking ways. Things get intense when Deacon Frost, a vampire, plans to summon Lamagra, the vampire god, so that vampires can rule the world. It's up to Blade and his companions to save the night and stop this evil plan. The movie starts with a bloody woman being rushed to the hospital, where she gives birth to a baby boy. 30 years later, we meet a young woman who takes a young man to an underground rave. Little do they know, the club is filled with vampires. As the night goes on, the young man notices something strange falling from the ceiling. To his horror, the sprinkler system starts spraying blood. He realizes that the club is full of vampires who attack him. But just when things seem hopeless, Blade appears. At first, Blade is hesitant to help, but he eventually fights back against the vampires. Remember to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever we drop another recap for you. After watching the movie, you can discuss whether you think it's good or bad. But for now, let's continue with the recap of Blade. So, there's this guy named Blade who is really good at killing vampires. He goes around and fights them all the time. In one big fight, Blade pins a vampire named Quinn to the walls with stakes and sets him on fire. But Blade has to run away when the police show up. Later on, Quinn's burnt body is taken to a hospital morgue. There, a doctor named Curtis Weber convinces another doctor named Karen Jensen to examine Quinn's body. But guess what? Quinn comes back to life and attacks Karen. He bites her, but Blade shows up just in time to save her. Blade beats up Quinn and chops off his arm. Before Blade can finish off Quinn, the police interrupt and Quinn escapes. Blade decides not to leave Karen to die, so he escapes from the police with her. The next day, Blade and Karen arrive at Blade's hideout, where his mentor Whistler is making weapons. Blade introduces Karen to Whistler, who warns Blade that Karen might turn into a vampire. But they inject her with a garlic suppressant to try and save her. In another scene, a group of vampire elders called the Council of Pureblood Vampire Elders learn about the vampire slaughter at a rave. They summon Frost, the leader of the New Age vampires, and scold him for causing trouble with the humans. They tell him to be more careful, but Frost wants to rule over humans and doesn't want to hide anymore. The elders dismiss him, but Frost threatens them before he leaves. So, in this part of the story, Blade drops Karen off at her home after warning her about vampires. He tells her to be careful. Karen enters her building feeling a bit paranoid. In the elevator, she notices two strange people with weird tattoos on their necks. This makes her even more paranoid. Finally, Karen reaches her floor and heads to her apartment. She believes that the strange people are following her, but it turns out they aren't. Phew. While Karen is packing some things in her apartment, a cop named Krieger shows up. He says he's checking up on her because she was kidnapped at the hospital last night. But guess what? Krieger is actually a bad guy. Karen tries to defend herself using garlic mace, but it doesn't work. Luckily, Blade comes to her rescue. Blade knows that Krieger is a vampire lackey, and he saves Karen from him. Blade and Karen search Krieger's car and find something important from the Hilburn Clinic. Blade wants to find out where Krieger is delivering the package, but Karen interrupts their interrogation. This gives Krieger a chance to escape. Blade tells Karen to wake up and realize that she needs to survive in this dangerous world. As Blade leaves, Karen decides to follow him because it's the only way she can stay alive long enough to find a cure. Hours later, Blade and Karen wait for Krieger to return to his car. Karen doubts that he will come back, but he does. They follow him to a club that secretly serves as a vampire safe house. Blade arms himself, and together with Karen, they force their way into the club. Blade and Karen confront Krieger and force him to reveal the entrance to a hidden compartment behind the fridge. After chasing Krieger away, Blade and Karen go down into the underground archive. Meanwhile, Frost, the main vampire villain, is up to something. What will Blade and Karen discover in the underground archive? Stay tuned to find out. There's a guy named Cracker who interrupts a party at Frost's place. He tells Frost that he accidentally led Blade into the archives. Cracker tries to apologize, but Frost and his vampire buddies start feasting on Cracker and draining him dry. After this, Frost tells Quinn to capture Blade alive. Back at the archive, Blade and Karen stumble upon Pearl, a really overweight custodian. Pearl begs Frost for help, but Frost leaves him to suffer. Blade, Karen, and Pearl use UV lights to torture Pearl, who ends up revealing a prophecy about the return of a god named Lamobra. Blade takes the hard drive with the prophecy and blows up a storage unit. Karen kills Pearl with a UV light. In the storage unit, they find parchments containing vampire history. While analyzing the parchments, Blade and Karen are suddenly attacked and captured by Quinn and his men. But just when things seem hopeless, Whistler, who has been in radio contact with Blade, shows up and saves the day. Whistler bombs the archive, allowing Blade and Karen to escape through an underground railway. Blade manages to chop off Quinn's arm again before grabbing onto a train and escaping with Karen. Karen helps Blade with his dislocated arm, and Blade injects himself with more serum that night. Later, Whistler reveals to Karen that Blade is a hybrid vampire. His mother died giving birth to him after being bitten by a vampire while she was pregnant. Blade has most of the strengths of vampires, but none of their weaknesses. However, he still thirsts for blood. Whistler also shares that he hunts vampires himself because a vampire killed his family and forced him to choose who would die first. Unfortunately, Blade and his allies are running out of time due to Frost and his vampire gang. They must find a way to stop Frost and his evil plans before it's too late. Whistler, one of the characters in the story, has a feeling that something big is going to happen later that night. Karen tries to convince Blade, the main character, that he is human and should forget about being a vampire. Blade, who has spent his whole life searching for the person who turned him into a vampire, refuses to forget. Meanwhile, Frost, the villain, is plotting to capture Blade. He calms down one of his henchmen, Quinn, and insists that they need him alive. Frost and his gang abduct Kitano, another character, and remove his fangs before exposing him to the sun, which kills him. Afterwards, Frost takes control of the Council of Elders and asks for 12 volunteers for his plan. In the next scene, Blade hands over evidence to Karen, containing information about a god. Karen shows them a substance called EDTA, which becomes explosive when it comes into contact with vampires. She suggests weaponizing it. While Karen extracts Blade's blood, they overhear Whistler coughing. Blade reveals that Whistler has cancer. When Blade leaves to get more serum, Whistler notices bite scars on Karen and reveals that she has already turned into a vampire. Meanwhile, Blade finds Frost outside a store, covered in sunscreen and holding a hostage. Frost tries to recruit Blade to his side, but Blade knows about a prophecy and only wants to kill Frost. Frost threatens to kill Blade, so Blade tries to shoot him. However, Frost dodges the bullets and throws the hostage in front of Blade, forcing him to save her while Frost escapes. Back at Blade's safe house, Karen injects herself with an experimental cure that might work for her but may not work on Blade. However, she and Whistler are attacked by Frost and his vampires. They take out Whistler and abduct Karen. Blade, the fearless vampire hunter, declares that Frost will meet his demise by dawn. He prepares himself for the ultimate battle. During the chaos, Frost and Quinn throw Karen into a pit where Webb, a rotting zombie creature, attacks her. However, Karen manages to beat Webb and escape the pit. Meanwhile, Blade is locked in a chamber in preparation for a ritual. Vanessa, a vampire, reveals to Blade that she has enjoyed being a vampire and that the thirst for blood always wins. She locks Blade in the chamber as the ritual begins. However, Karen releases Blade from the chamber, and he regains his strength by drinking her blood. Frost and Quinn force the Guardians into their positions for the ritual, unaware that Karen has escaped. As the ritual commences, Karen forces Blade to drink her blood, draining her completely. Blade falls on the elders, and Frost drinks from Karen, regaining his strength. But it's